Hello, and welcome to Staff Picks, the podcast for movie nerds by movie nerds. As always, I'm Mario Lanza, and in our never-ending quest to bring you more of the underrated, underloved, unknown movies out there, boy, do we have a perfect choice for that today. My movie today is called Tourist Trap, and it is a very obscure horror movie from 1979, and it's just one of those that not many people know about, but those who do know about it love it and just absolutely rave about it. And this is one that was absolutely made for a podcast like this. It's just begging for more people to know about it. So, again, our movie's Tourist Trap, and I'm going to bring on my guest here. My guest here is a fellow horror movie fan. He is a big-time lover of this movie. In fact, I believe he's the one who recommended it to me rather than me recommending it to him. And it fascinates me because he's way younger than me, and I have no idea how he knows about this movie in the first place. So I'd like to bring him on and we'll delve into this. Welcome, Justin Jones.
Hello.
Okay, so let's get into this question right away, Justin. What year were you born?
97.
You were born in 97, and we are talking about a movie from 1979 here. Now,
Yeah.
It came out 18 years before you were born. It was a bomb. It made no money. You're not even from this country. You're from the Netherlands, correct?
Yes, I am.
How the hell do you know about Tourist Trap?
So growing up, like especially during my teenage stage, I was very much into slasher movies. I'd often just marathon, like the more mainstream franchises like Friday the 13th and Halloween and stuff, and just all the sequels that came afterwards. And yeah, and I just knew a lot about slashers. So once I kind of went through all of the more well-known ones, it kind of turned into me doing some deep research about more obscure slashers. And that's when I kind of encountered Tourist Trap, and it had a certain charm to it, and yeah, it kind of stuck with me, so that's kind of how I know about it.
You just told me recently you own the soundtrack. You have it on vinyl or something for Tourist Trap?
Yes, I actually bought the vinyl 3 weeks.
That's so cool. You're a bigger horror movie nerd than I am. I love that. And again, I have my extreme, but I've never owned a movie from 18 years before I was born with the soundtrack on vinyl. So I tip my cap to you. And would you say this is one of the best horror movies you know? Is it just an obscure one? Without going too much into the plot, what does this movie mean to you? Why did this one jump out to you so much?
I wouldn't say it's one of my all-time favorites, but it kind of has that cult appeal to it, I guess. It's I don't know, just the soundtrack and just the cheesiness, but together with also just the unsettling nature that kind of complements each other in a way. So I think that's kind of what stuck with me. So that's one of the things that I fondly remember. It's not something that I claim to be a masterpiece, but it's one that I often recommend to people who are also into slasher movies.
Yeah, this is one of those that I don't recommend to first-time horror movie watchers or they're just getting into horror movies. This is one that I tend to recommend to people who think they know every other horror movie, and I just love throwing this one at them. And they're like, hey, there's this movie where these mannequins come to life and attack people in this little out-of-the-way motel or rest stop place. And it's funny because I thought I knew every horror movie, and every so often I just go out and Google search random underrated horror movies or top 20 unknown horror movies, because people are always making lists and posting them, and this is one that just popped up a lot, and that's how I discovered it. And I only discovered it about 5 years ago. So it's one of those things like you were getting at. It's just an unsettling little, it's not really a masterpiece, but it's also at the same time not a waste of time either. It's flawed, but it's a very fun, memorable, quirky little movie.
I could definitely see the flaws in it, and some parts are a little laughable, but that's part of the charm to it, It's it has those cheesy moments that, you want from a slasher, but it, also just has that, also something about it too, that just the mannequins and how they move and everything. It's just, I don't know, it kind of sticks with you, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, for the people who have never seen it before, this is, like I said, it's a story of these young people that kind of end up at this little, it's called Slausen's Lost Oasis, this little unknown little former tourist stop on the edge of town, and it's all abandoned now, and they get in there, and it's basically this guy who lives alone, and he's got a collection of mannequins, and they're very lifelike, and they're going to come to life, and they start attacking people, and it's very, again, it's It's a goofy movie. They did it on Riff Tracks. Did you know that? The Mystery Science Theater guys actually made fun of this movie.
I read about that. I did not actually see it though.
Yeah, I have not seen it, and I will not see it because I love this movie too much. But that is one of the things that people don't know. That I mean, I've grown up with Mystery Science Theater my whole life. That they don't necessarily just watch horrible movies. They want to watch quirky, cheesy movies. Those are the ones that tend to work best with the riffing. And that's like there's a lot of these weird horror movies from the 70s would make fantastic Mystery Science Theater episodes. So I don't think that's really a condemnation of this movie that they did it on Riff Tracks, other than I ain't watching it. And the one other thing I want to mention about this movie to people, and this is fascinating, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this episode so badly, is that you know what this movie is rated, right, Justin?
It's PG.
It's PG. This is a rare PG-rated slasher movie, to the point that the director, when he made it, and this is legitimately a scary, unsettling R-rated horror movie, and when the director made it and he cut it, and there's no nudity, there's barely any blood in it, and the MPAA said we're going to give it a PG, and he's like, no, that'll kill my audience. So to this day, he's still bitter that they gave his movie a PG. Yeah, and you've seen that, right? His interviews, he's mad about it that they gave it, and they killed any chance that it ever had to develop an audience.
Yeah, no, he's definitely still bitter about it. Which I mean, I can understand. Because back then, I don't believe they had a PG-13 rating, so it was just like either PG or R. So it was just like this was just like on that fine line, like in between, but it definitely leaned more towards R, and I find it amazing that it didn't get an R, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. There's 3 scenes in particular, and we're going to walk through this movie beat by beat. This is one of those we're going to spoil the whole thing for you, so don't worry about it. But yeah, there's 3 scenes in particular in this movie that are absolutely should have guaranteed an R. And there's one where the girl gets a knife in the back of her head. There's no way that should be in a PG movie. And then there's one at the beginning where this guy gets impaled by a bunch of metal objects, which is way too scary for a PG movie. And then the one, can you guess what the 3rd scene is I'm going to say here? What would you say the most memorable, scariest scene in this movie is?
The one that stuck out to me, but it didn't have anything to do with like anything like gory, it was just the haunting image, was when Tanya Roberts was on the ground and the mannequins were like surrounding her.
Oh yeah.
And like with like the kind of whimpering sound that they were making together with the soundtrack. That's the part that unsettles me most whenever I see it. Mm-hmm. But I doubt that that's the one that you mean.
that is actually a fantastic one, and I have a point about that I want to make. But the 3rd scene that really I think is the signature scene is where a girl is basically suffocated when the bad guy puts plaster all over her face until she dies of panic and her heart explodes, which is such a unsettling scene. I'm like, there's no way that should be in a movie that's PG. It astounds me that this one got away with the PG rating, but again, it did, and it haunted this movie, and that was the big problem with this movie, why you don't hear about Tourist Trap in the same breath as Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and Halloween, because it was a PG and it was considered a little too light, and then it just kind of got a legacy as being this movie that was on cable TV a lot in the 80s and then was kind of forgotten.
Yeah, I heard it was on cable a lot, and like a lot of people that did see it one time on cable, they were often like younger. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those films that really, really unsettled them like that. So it's like, it kind of grew a cult following because of that. Mm-hmm. But it's like still a smaller one though. It's definitely not like something that ever blew up and is now forgotten, basically.
Yeah. I think the word you were searching for is traumatized, that a lot of little kids stumbled onto this movie in the 80s, mid-80s, and were traumatized by what is ostensibly a PG movie where horrible, bad things are happening to people. And I have some experience with this myself, is that I will share a little bit of my history with horror movies here. When I was a little kid, I'm talking 5, 6, 7 years old, my parents wouldn't let me watch R-rated movies. There's nothing like Friday the 13th, Halloween. Those were never going to see the light of day in my house. But you would see stuff on TV that was creepy and would push the boundaries. And I do remember seeing, when I was a kid, like in kindergarten, somebody made a student film, and it was on like Showtime or HBO a lot. And it was about this guy. He was like a filmmaker, and he worked with negatives, like film stock and film negatives.
Uh-huh.
And at one time late at night, all these film strips came to life, and they started coming after him and trying to strangle him. And the whole movie with these inanimate pieces of film stock coming to get him. And it was like the scariest thing. And to this day, I've been looking for that movie. I don't know what it is, but it bothered me so much. And it's just this idea that inanimate objects will come and attack you and try to kill you. And that's such an unsettling thing for little kids to see, which I think is why this movie probably messed up so many kids of that era. Because, again, it's the inanimate, these mannequins coming to life and attacking you. And it's such a creepy premise that it just sits with you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've definitely had those types of movies growing up as well. I mean, I don't think it was like those types of obscure ones, but, you know, there were like certain movies that like really unsettled me. Like there was, like I saw The Howling when I was, I think like 8 or 9. And that there were some scenes in that kind of got me a little bit traumatized. So, and then, I mean, of course I grew up with like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. So I guess I was a little bit more used to that, but you know, just used to just the horror genre in general. But yeah, there's just something about, just like those more like unsettling scenes. It's very rare that you actually find movies that have, you know, like this, things that can really stick with you, because so many slasher movies are so forgettable. Yeah, this movie's just great.
Well, again, most movies will beat you over the head with either gore, kind of in the 80s, or nowadays with the jump scares. But I was just thinking back to that inanimate objects thing. I remember Poltergeist. You've seen Poltergeist, I would assume, right?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, that movie messed up every single kid I know when the clown doll attacks the little kid and the tree. Like, little stuff like that just really affects kids. And I'm trying to think even like Creepshow 2, there was a scene where that floating blob in the lake attacks the people on the raft, which always bothered me.
That was actually a scene that I saw when I was like 7, I think.
Oh, I bet that was a fun night.
Yeah, that one was actually like, I remember I was raving about it to my friends back then, and it was just like, you know, I was just telling them the story about, you know, the fact that there was this blob that was like basically tearing people's skin off as they were swimming. But yeah, Creepshow is also one of those really just true like great products from that time, you know.
Now, we are speaking of Stephen King, who, of course, wrote Creepshow, and this movie has a very interesting tie-in with Stephen King. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, so apparently with that Danse Macabre or whatever, he wrote, there was like a certain fragment of the book that he was raving about, like underappreciated horror movies that more people should see, and he mentioned Tourist Trap and saying that it, you know, was basically one that he feels that all horror movie lovers should basically see.
Yeah, Stephen King wrote this book in around 1981, 82, 83, somewhere in there. It's called Danse Macabre, and it's really his thoughts on the industry, on horror movies, horror books in general, and just everything about horror. And there's a chapter where Stephen King talks about his favorite horror movies over the years, and this is the one. This is the one that Stephen King lists as his all-time favorite underrated horror movie. He says Tourist Trap, and he raves about it in there. And it's funny because I read that after I had just seen it for the first time, and I'm like, oh my God, why did I read this book earlier? I would have known about Tourist Trap. But yeah, so the only danger with that is I'm worried we're going to get people's hopes up. Like, this movie isn't as good as Halloween or any of those masterpieces, but it is fantastic in its way that, like, the first 45 minutes of this movie are about as creepy as any movie I could think of. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I always said that this movie had a really unique structure. Instead of just like letting everything be a slow burn type of thing where they like the first 45 minutes is basically build up. Like a lot in this movie, like for example, the opening scene, like there's only like 5 like real, you know, characters in this movie, and like one of them just dies in the opening scene, so you're just left with 4. And it's really interesting how the structure is for the rest of the movie, because like basically the final act starts when you're like just barely halfway through the movie. It's really interesting. But yeah, those first, you know, 40 minutes are definitely like, it creates a very unique atmosphere, to say the least.
And I have heard people, I know a couple people that know this movie, and they'll say, this is something I hear a lot, that, oh, it's such a wonderful, it's like such an amazing half of a movie, and then it kind of tails off in the second half, which I don't know if that's really fair to it. I mean, obviously, I don't think the second half is as strong as the first half, but
Yeah.
it's one of those. Yeah, it's not. It does not keep up the pace, unfortunately, and it just doesn't work all the way to the end. I don't think. But man, I just again this. If you want 45 minutes of a horror movie, the first half of Tourist Trap is about as good as you're going to find, I would say.
Right. And then also just like the way, just like when you get bits and pieces of like the backstory and you're like kind of piecing things together. For example, like the wife, that's like the mannequin
Hmm.
that is like in the little, light door frame thing, it's, and then they're like looking through the picture book and they kind of like saying like, oh, that looks a lot like him. Maybe it's just a sort of tribute. And then, like a little bit before that, they actually, felt the skin or it's like, this feels really real.
Hmm.
I don't know. It seems like that, that kind of build up the mystery aspect a little bit. I mean, even though it's kind of a dead giveaway, that what it actually is, but it's still, it kind of it contributes to the story, which I, like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's one that does reward you for repeat viewings. And I've only seen it a couple times. I think today I watched it, and it's only the third time I've ever seen it. But you do notice more and more of the story. Like the first time you watch it, there's so much going on with telekinesis going on, and people turning into mannequins and then back to skin again. And are people dead? Are they reincarnated? Are there two bad guys? Are there one? It's kind of hard to take it all in the first time. But I would say it gets better on multiple viewings. And I do notice every time I watch it, I like it a little bit more.
Yeah, no, this was also my third time viewing it, and yeah, it's definitely like one of those. I think the last time I saw it was in 2015. So yeah, this was definitely like very like if I wouldn't have seen it tonight, I think I probably like would have forgotten most of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I mean, of course, now I would have remembered like the scenes that stuck with me. But like just because it does have at the end of the day, it does still have the typical like slasher filler, that kind of is a little bit forgettable.
Okay, I'm just curious before we delve into this. It's kind of hard recommending horror movies on this podcast because I know a lot of people that just don't like horror movies. They don't take them seriously.
Sure, yeah.
And then I have some of my listeners who will only listen to my horror movie episodes because that's all they're here for. So it's kind of it's a odd mixed bag of when you start recommending horror movies. And I always say I never recommend anything that's just blood and guts. I don't recommend anything that's just torture porn or unpleasant to sit through. I recommend stuff that's quirky and just unsettling and will sit with you. And so I'm curious, like, what is your favorite horror movie overall? I make no pretense about it that my favorite is Halloween, and I don't think any of the other horror movie is even close. I think they're all kind of some variant or ripoff of Halloween. What's your favorite? I'm curious.
Well, one of my favorites is Wes Craven's debut film, The Last House on the Left from 1972. That one is unhinged horror at its best, in my opinion. A lot of people actually see it as like exploitation trash, but to me, it like has, I don't know. There's certain things that like really, really stuck with me in that movie and like truly disturbed me to the core. And it was like one of those movies that was just like, I can't believe this was made during that time, like when things were a bit more sensitive and just to the extremities it went. And, because I generally don't really like, just like the over amount of gore and stuff like that. But I don't know, I feel like The Last House on the Left kind of had more of a artistic side to it that kind of made it better. So yeah, The Last House on the Left is definitely one of them. And then, of course, it sounds a little bit cliche, but I grew up with The Shining, so that's definitely like one of my all-time favorites as well. I also watched the miniseries from Stephen King, which I didn't like very much, but like the Stanley Kubrick one was, I just love Stanley Kubrick as a director. I've seen all of his movies, and then also Audition from 1999 by Takeshi Miike. I don't know if you ever saw that one.
I have heard of that one. That's one that people get warned about before they see it.
Yes, that one is. I wasn't really expecting too much going into it, but I left that theater like a different man, like straight up.
Audition is not one that I would inflict on my viewers without probably screening them and warning them first. Because I haven't actually seen that. I just heard about it. I kind of know all the beats.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that would be a fun one to talk about. But Last House on the Left, that's hardcore. Like, that's full on. Like you're saying, the 70s were a little more gentle time. It was also more of an unregulated time when you could get away with anything in a movie. And some of that
Yeah.
stuff, yeah, Last House on the Left is not one that I would do on staff picks only because I don't want to mess up people's lives that have never seen it before.
Yeah.
But I fully respect that you love that movie because I know a lot of people who do. But yeah, that is hardcore horror movie right there.
Yeah, it's one of those that, you truly just never forget. Have you seen it then?
I have. I know Last House on the Left very well, and that's that. Yeah. Again, we have listeners that don't even watch horror movies. Now I will say, Tourist Trap is nothing like any of these other ones. This is such a palatable PG movie that you can watch, and it's not going to just beat you over the head with unpleasantness and gore. And again, so that's the point I'm trying to get across. That there's much harder stuff out there that we're not going to be talking about in this episode.
The next one is the original 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre by Tobe Hooper.
Mm-hmm.
That one, I was fascinated by that movie as a child, which sounds very macabre, and I'm like, I can understand why my mom thought I'd one day turn into like some sort of, odd, slash serial killer, but I ended up not turning into that. Because like she legit one time forbid me to buy horror movies because like one time we went to the free record shop. I wanted to buy the entire collection of Nightmare on Elm Street, and I think I was like 9 at the time.
Oh, good.
She said, "Don't even think about it." Like, because like she saw the games I was playing with my friends, and a lot of them were tag, but we'd play as characters from horror movies instead. So like I would pick like Leatherface or something, and then one of my friends would pick Michael Myers, and then like whoever was like not the tagger was like the victim. So it was because of those like games that my mom was getting slightly concerned. So, but yeah, Texas Chainsaw though was like one of those movies that she basically did not want me to see until I was like 16.
Those are good. Those are good instincts by a mother, I should say. By the way.
Yeah, pretty sure. Like back then, I was like hating on her, but like now, I can totally understand that. Like that one's kind of creepy. I mean, I like now, I'm definitely generally a pretty timid person, so I am not like anything like what one may have predicted at some point in my life. But
well, I should point out your mom was worried that you were going to turn into like a serial killer, and you have not. But I should point out you're still young and there's time, so you should be very cognizant of that as you're growing up. That your mom was worried about this. Remember, you still have about 10 more years before you have the possibility to turn evil. So be careful of that.
Okay. Definitely will be.
I have to say, for our non-horror movie fans, Texas Chainsaw Massacre very similar to Tourist Trap in many ways. It's got an almost identical plot in some places. But what's interesting about Texas Chainsaw is that it's almost bloodless. There's almost no gore in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is weird. You wouldn't think that.
The thing that's unsettling about Texas Chainsaw though is that it has like this documentary sort of way of filming. Mm-hmm. That kind of like makes it have this like unhinged feeling. And going on to the last one, Suspiria.
More really hardcore horror movies here.
Yeah, Suspiria is like, just like the color palette is one of the most unique color palettes I've ever seen on film. It's a lot of people say that it's style over substance, which I can see. The movie is incredibly cheesy, but it's a visual spectacle that I feel everyone should see. But the gore, it isn't as like it's not as bad as like you'd probably think. It's like so few and far between that it's like I feel like it shouldn't be judged upon that.
Again, you got to know your audience with those ones you're recommending to people. Because again, I've shown my daughter in particular, Vanessa, I've shown her tons of horror movies. I'm always trying to get her to appreciate the really good ones, the really ones that I would consider artistic. I don't know if I would ever show her Last House on the Left because I would be afraid that would traumatize her. Texas Chainsaw is not one we've done yet, but I've leaned towards it. I'm kind of waiting to make sure she's ready for that one because that one's an experience. Suspiria,
sure, yeah.
Suspiria might be a little too hardcore for me even, let alone an 18-year-old girl. So yeah, these are all hardcore horror movies. Yeah, so you clearly know your stuff. You like these really I wouldn't say disturbing, but the really unregulated artistic ones would be your preference, I would say.
Yeah, and I also really love it when movies kind of go a bit more into the psyche of the characters, and especially when it comes to serial killers, mm-hmm. which is what I loved about Tourist Trap actually. was that they tried to humanize the villain.
Yeah, they actually do. Actually do try to give this story a motivation, like a real life backstory for their bad guy, which is the interesting thing. So, yeah, that's the thing. Like, we got about 30 minutes here. Let's go through Tourist Trap for people who have never seen this before, which I'm guessing is all of you.
What about your favorite horror movies? Like just a quick like name.
Halloween, my all-time favorite is the original Halloween. I love Black Christmas, which came before that, very similar to Halloween. We did a show on that. One of my all-time favorite movies, I don't know if it's fair to call it a horror movie, is The Wicker Man, the original Wicker Man from the 70s.
Yeah.
And then I am a big fan of these paranoia thrillers. They're not straight horror movies, they're not slasher movies, but like Arlington Road from 1999, one of my all-time favorites. So stuff like that. I tend not to like slasher movies all that much once we got past Halloween, because Halloween and Black Christmas kind of did everything that that genre could do. So that's my world right there.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so Tourist Trap, 1979, PG-rated horror movie, and again, just a bunch of nobodies. Again, the lead in this movie is an actor named Chuck Connors, who people may know. He was in the 60s and 70s. He played in a show called The Rifleman. Very well known as a actor in westerns. He had a big, thick, rugged jaw, just looked like a cowboy. And then kind of towards the end of his career, he decided he wanted to kind of reinvent himself as a horror movie actor. He wanted to maybe try something new, similar to what Boris Karloff did. Boris Karloff became a horror actor later in his career. So Chuck Connors did this movie, Tourist Trap, where he plays the evil Mr. Slauson. And again, it didn't really happen for him, but that's the history behind this movie. It's kind of a star vehicle for Chuck Connors. Now, do you know Chuck Connors at all?
I haven't really seen anything else he's in, I believe.
Yeah. And that doesn't surprise me. I didn't think you would. I'm just curious. But yeah, so that's the only real name in this movie, Chuck Connors. And then there's 4 teenagers that are going to get killed through the course of the movie at his fun house of mannequins. One of them is played by Tanya Roberts, who people might know. She was on Charlie's Angels, and she was a James Bond girl. She was in A View to a Kill with Roger Moore. So that's really the extent of the name recognition in this movie.
Also, Tanya Roberts, she was also the mother of Donna in that 70s show.
That's right. And she was also in a movie called The Beastmaster.
Ah, really? I have not seen that.
And she is without question the standout hot girl in this movie. In fact, I've even seen reviews say her little halter top that she wears, that's the true star of the movie, Tanya Roberts' halter top.
I know. The first time I saw this, I was actually shocked when I later on found out that was actually Donna's mom from that 70s show. Like, I was like, oh, I mean, like, afterwards I pieced it together, but I was like, damn, like she was like pretty smoking in this movie.
Oh yeah, no, there's some hot girls in this movie, and again, there's no nudity, and that's what makes this movie stand out of its era. That there's not a single, like, there's barely any swearing, and there's no nudity. There's hardly any blood at all. And I read a funny story about that there was supposed to be nudity in the script. These girls were supposed to get topless in a swimming scene, but the director was so shy he couldn't ask them to take their tops off. And so they just didn't do it, and that's why the movie ended up getting a PG, because there were no boobs in it. So it's really the director's fault, because he was a shy gentleman, that this movie bombed.
I know, but it's that story, because I'd also read that before, and that was like incredibly funny to me, because I feel like if he would have brought it across like during the casting process, I feel like, he would have been able to get more of a clear vision.
His vision.
It's like, or I mean. Yeah, it's like, I don't know, I feel like he would have been able to, he would have been able to know the end product, I should say, better, if he wouldn't have been so shy about such things, because he actually asked them before they were going to shoot that scene, and, obviously they're going to say no, but I don't know, I just find it funny that he didn't, make it clear during the casting process, because, it's almost, in a way, even more awkward that he asked it while they were going to do it, it's just like, I don't know. That just is funny to me, but.
So I guess this is our advice to all future directors out there: fight for your vision.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll whip through this movie. Again, there's not a lot of plot. This isn't a very intricate drama or anything. It's really just 4 people show up at this. Oh wait, no, there's these 5. There's 5 teenagers at the start of the movie. They're on a little joyriding trip, cross-country trip, I don't know, and one of their cars breaks down. And so the start of the movie is one of them just walking to the nearest gas station, rolling a tire because his car is broken down. And we're out in California somewhere. We're in the middle of nowhere. I don't know where this is set specifically, but people who have been in Central California or the deserts of California, you know there's some pretty barren areas around there where there's nothing going on. And so this guy rolls his tire, and he ends up at this place called Slosson's Lost Oasis and Gas Station. And he goes inside, and again, he's all by himself. And he just walks into this abandoned restaurant, and he's kind of looking around for someone to help him. And he walks to the back room, and in the back room there's all these mannequins sitting there, all these, again, store mannequins, just creepy, lifelike models. And he's like, huh. And he's looking around, and all of a sudden the doors slam in the room, and all the mannequins start coming to life. And again, this is the scene that Stephen King specifically mentioned in his book as being so creepy, and it really is effective. This is one of the better starts to a horror movie I can think of the 70s or any era, where just everything in the room goes crazy, and it's like that like almost like a scene of Mary Poppins while all the things are flying around the room, like the cleaning the nursery. But yeah, so the mannequins are coming after him and screaming at him. These metal pieces of shards are going flying across the room trying to impale him and stuff, and he ends up getting his arm trapped in the door. A mannequin grabs him and holds him, and then this metal rod pierces him through the door. And it's like, whoa, that's quite a start to a horror movie. It really jumps and makes you jump out of your seat there. And the movie is going to try to keep up with that pace all along. And it's again, that's just the standout scene right at the start of this movie. Really creepy, and it's one that you might want to make sure you're ready for that one before you see it. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I feel like also the soundtrack that goes with it also kind of, complements that entire scene, because it's just so unsettling. And then also the noises that the mannequins make, it's just like such a haunting scene, for sure.
For people who don't know it, the mannequins in this movie, they are very lifelike, incredibly lifelike, but they all have this one expression where their jaw hangs open, and it's like hangs down further than the human mouth would hang down. And it's really just an odd, creepy visual, and you're going to see it over and over in this movie. These dark, lifeless dolls turning at you, their eyes moving towards you, and their mouths just hanging open to a degree that's about 20 degrees further than it should open, and it's just creeping maw, and that's all I can say about it. That's the one thing that you'll remember about this movie and what really made it stand out for Stephen King, those creepy doll heads.
Yeah, and then also the climax of the movie, don't mean to jump ahead too much, but like, just to point this out real quick, that the climax of the movie features a scene where before like the main character, kills the villain, she, like, all the mannequins kind of like turn their heads, just like start staring at her, but it's like, and then like the mouths just truly go wide open and just like this kind of like almost screech type of sound.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that really, those type of scenes are the stuff that stick with you,
Not only does it stick with me, it makes me wonder why more horror movies don't use mannequins as a plot device, or like wax statues or stuff like that, because it's so naturally unsettling just to see these creepy human-looking faces turning towards you and moving on their own. And it just astounds me there aren't that many movies that use this.
I know. I feel the exact same way, because like there's a certain scene in the movie where Chuck Connors is like looking for his brother, and he's going through the rooms, calling his name out, but it's like as he's going through them, he's kind of going one by one, but every single, like, the hallway that he's going through, as well as the rooms, are all dark at the beginning. But as soon as like he turns on the first light, you can kind of see the silhouettes of some of the mannequins, like on both sides. And it's like as he goes further down and he's like turning on the lights from the room, it kind of like illuminates a little bit more of the hallway. And it's like every single time the mannequins are just like silhouettes, and it's like kind of the way that the lighting was used in that scene was very impressive and very unsettling. Just the fact that the mannequins are there as silhouettes, it's like it kind of creates this really uneasy feeling as you're watching it.
Yeah, and that's what's so amazing about this movie, is that even when mannequins aren't doing anything, they're scary. They're just standing there, and there's entire scenes in this movie, people are walking by them or just in between two mannequins, and something's going to happen eventually, but you don't know when. And that's what makes it so unsettling, because they're not even doing anything and they're still scary. And so that's the one thing that I just can't get over about this movie, that it's not gory, it's not jump scary, it's not unpleasant, there's no torture, but it's just unsettling. You're just in this weird house with these weird mannequins, and we'll get into the plot here. I'm just going to run through it real quick. Basically, yeah, the other four young people go to this gas station and try to find what happened to their missing friend. They end up meeting this guy, Mr. Slauson. He runs a place called Slauson's Lost Oasis, and there's a big sign out in front which basically says, famous figures, notorious bandits, Indian artifacts, wild animals. And this, you get the sense this was a one time this very important tourist spot that people would stop, and it's kind of dried up. Nobody goes here anymore. So it's just this old man living alone in this museum with all these wax figures. And again, it's there are a lot of celebrities. Like there's a Buffalo Bill down there. There's General Custer. There's Civil War. So it was like a one time a museum people would stop at to look at all the wax statues. And now it's just all dried up. And so yeah, it's just this old man living alone with all these statues. And we'll find out later. This is where I'm basically going to spoil the movie, that this guy has a power. He's got this telekinesis he can do, and he can make the mannequins come to life. He can make them move. He can make them appear to be alive, and that's what's keeping him from going insane all these years living alone on this place, that these mannequins are his friends. He can control them. He can animate them, and basically he's got this sick part of his brain that when people show up, he wants to entertain them. If they want to leave, he's going to kill them. No one's allowed to leave because he's so lonely he needs more people here. He'll have his mannequins kill the people, and then he has this process that he can do where he basically turns their flesh into a mannequin, into like this polymer or latex, and they will become mannequins that will live in his museum for the rest of eternity, and he preserves them, and these are how he has his friends. So it's just some very bad things are going to happen to these people in his museum.
That actually reminds me, because he does, have that like multi-personality thing going on throughout the movie, and that, of course reminds me of Norman Bates. Movie villains like that, also just like Leatherface even, that they just kind of and connect to something that truly gives them comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And like in their warped perspective, it kind of just makes sense. So like they'll do like really messed up shit to like actually preserve it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I was going to say the two movies that this gets compared to the most, and just if you read through reviews and articles about horror movies, the two movies this one gets compared to are Psycho, because it's the sad guy living alone, and just he's so pathetic that his, in Norman Bates' mom died. In this one, the Slauson, his wife died, his brother died. We learned later that he caught his brother having an affair with his wife. He killed them both, and then he animated their corpses and made them into mannequins so he could keep them around. So yeah, Psycho, this is very similar to. And then again, like you said earlier, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that it feels very similar. It's so low budget and raw. It's just kind of unnerving in that way because it feels so cheap and almost real in a way.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love about just Chuck Connors in general and his character is, the fact that they do try and really humanize him. Because, I guess it takes kind of someone with, I wouldn't say a broken mind, but someone who...
Tragedy. He's been through tragedy.
Yeah, so I feel like he's definitely one of the more sympathetic, like slasher movie villains.
Yeah, Chuck Connors kind of gives it a little bit of dignity and just kind of competence, because this isn't really the type of movie he does, but he was a respected actor, and he kind of had some stature in the world at the time. So, he kind of holds this movie together where you got this guy doing incredibly sick things, and that's the thing with this movie, that, three of these teenagers are going to die just because they're expendable, but one of the girls in the party, her name is Molly, and this guy Slauson, Chuck Connors, falls in love with her. She reminds him of his wife, and you see his backstory here, that he's killed all these people over the years. He just has an entire house and a museum full of tourists he has killed to keep him company as mannequins. And then the saddest thing is his wife. He keeps his wife on display. He murdered her many years ago when she had an affair. He somehow turned her into this really lifelike mannequin, and they even say at some point when someone touches her skin and says, wow, that feels like flesh, and it is flesh underneath the polymer. But yeah, so he keeps her in display in the museum in a tribute to his beautiful wife he loved so many years. And now this movie, he finds one of these girls, Molly, who reminds him of his wife, and that's the thing. He wants her to become the new wife, and that's why she just doesn't die like everybody else. So it's the story of, is Molly going to escape? Is she going to become his wife? Is she going to get turned into a mannequin? And that's really the struggle of this movie. And again, the second half, it kind of gets bogged down in chase scenes and, extended kill scenes before he kills somebody. But that's the whole premise of this movie: will Slauson get a replacement wife or not?
Basically.
Yeah. If you want to sum this up for the Golden Retriever video movie guide or something, that's the one sentence of the movie right there. Will Slauson get a replacement wife?
Yeah, that's exactly. I don't think about it that way, but that.
Okay. Well, let's go through the kill scenes again. That's kind of what people. Again, I know people may watch this movie even if they don't know horror movie, even if they don't like horror movies because we sold it correctly. So let's go through the kill scenes. So the first guy, Woody, shows up, gets impaled by all the metal things, then the mannequins attack him. The second girl, Eileen, I believe is her name. She's got real frizzy hair. She shows up and she starts snooping around Slauson's house, and she meets Slauson's crazy twin brother, also played by Chuck Connors, named Davey. And then she will end up getting strangled. All these mannequins will kind of corner her in a room, and telekinetically, Davy will make her scarf. She'll be strangled by her own scarf, and later she will turn into a mannequin. We'll see her. Let's see, what are the other two? You got Tina, right? Tina's the girl that he kidnaps off the freeway? Yes, it is Tina. It's at one point, we don't have enough characters in this movie, so the bad guy had to go physically steal someone from the highway. He stole this girl, Tina, and she's the one where we see this really, really unsettling scene. And this is the one I cannot believe did not end up in a rated R movie, where he's going to turn her into a mannequin. And we see the process, which basically him tying her down to a table. He smears all this plaster on her face, or like latex, and then he basically is taunting her the whole time as he's doing this, like, you're not going to die from the suffocation, you're going to die from fear, you'll panic and your heart will explode. And he's like covering her mouth or nostrils, and again, it's really unsettling. And this is probably the hardest core horror scene I have recommended in any of my movies so far.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that particular scene, it's like, as he's explaining everything, it's like you envision yourself in that situation, and he explains it so thoroughly, where you're just like, as he's explaining that the skin is going to start burning, and just like, and then, but right before he right before he covers the last part, her nose, so that will make her not breathe anymore, and, he's explaining that she'll die of panic beforehand, and it's just like, that entire scene, it's just like you're just basically on the tip of your chair, and it's just like, yeah, it's very, very unsettling, like you said. And I'm really shocked that was not a scene that convinced the MPAA to actually make it an R rating, because, yeah, that is definitely pretty hardcore.
Yeah, and then for people who haven't seen this movie and probably won't see this movie, just listen to the end of this episode, because I always do a little stinger at the end of the episode. I have my Deathstalker 2 theme music, and then at the end I put a little sound clip from the movie that we just talked about. I will try to put his speech there as the stinger, so you can hear him taunting her and saying that she's going to suffocate and her heart is going to explode, and that'll be the stinger. So just listen to that one, and then decide if you would like to watch this movie or not.
So going back to Eileen and her death scene, so the second death scene, the one where she's snooping through the house, that one was because that's when Chuck Connors actually, or in his mannequin form, is standing behind, like he suddenly like appears behind her.
Yeah.
And it's very, I don't know how to explain it. It's like, yeah, that is definitely one of those scenes that also kind of stuck with me too. It's because all of a sudden he's just there, behind her, and it's just like, and that like kind of blank expression, it's just like, oh geez.
Yeah, sometimes Slauson is just walking around as this old dude, this old farmer with a limp and a shotgun, and then at other times he will play his twin brother Davy, and he's got like a half of a mannequin's mask over his head. It's a very unsettling look. It's almost drag queeny in a way he kind of looks, yeah. And it's got these dark blank eyes, and only his lower jaw moves, like the top of his mouth doesn't move, and it's just an unsettling look when he's out there hunting for kids or getting ready to stalk them and kill them and turn them into mannequins. He's got this very, it's just a very odd look, and he loves to sneak up behind people and just stand there and watch them. And again, this movie doesn't have a whole lot of jump scares, but it is just unsettling to see him just watching people before he's going to kill them. He likes to watch them and observe them before all the festivities. Yeah.
Definitely noticed that. It's also funny, like one of the earlier scenes, once they're swimming in the pond, it's almost comical, like how close he is to observing them, and they're just totally oblivious to it.
Yeah.
That actually made me laugh. I was just barely rewatching it because it's like, he's so close, and you guys are just like, playfully being in the pond.
Yeah, well, it's funny because a lot of people forget that Michael Myers did that in the original Halloween. He just watches people.
Yeah.
And that's what actually makes it creepier, that in the original Halloween, I think there's only 3 or 4 murders in the whole movie, and that there's like a huge chunk of time where nothing happens, and it's just Michael Myers walking around just basically being a peeping Tom.
Yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, Michael Myers is definitely one of those like silent,
He's a perv.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, now that I think about it, a lot of the scenes in Halloween, I mean, also its sequels, it's him basically observing women as they change.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Not only is he a murderer, he's a sicko. He's a perv. Creep.
Right.
The more I find out about this Michael Myers character, the more I don't like him.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
So we've killed most of the people in this movie. We killed 3, and now we get the really big signature death scene. This is Tanya Roberts, the hot girl, again, who the director was unable to persuade to go topless, even though I believe she was in Playboy like a year after this. So he just missed his window there.
Right.
But yeah, there's a really long extended chase scene in this movie where Tanya Roberts, her name is what is her name in this movie? Becky, I believe.
Yes.
That's a fun drinking game one could play. Try to remember the character names in Tourist Trap.
I know. It's like all the characters, they just kind of mend. I mean, I feel like that's kind of what slashers in general, though.
Yeah.
It's like character names, they're just basically irrelevant.
I will say it's fun to talk about horror movies on staff picks because I don't have to care who the actors are. Oh yeah, just blonde girl, then the other blonde girl, like because it doesn't matter most of the time. In this one, there's Tanya Roberts and then a couple other people, and that's how I remember it. But yeah, so the big extended chase scene where the hot girl gets chased and basically Slauson toys with her. He brings her down to his oasis. The museum with all the famous figures with Custer and all these guys, and he basically just puts her in the middle of the room and he locks all the doors with his mind, and just as a sport he just kind of watches all his mannequins going crazy and trying to kill her. And that's the other big signature scene in this movie where General Custer's shooting at her, you got a Civil War guy shooting at her, and she's just dodging bullets and dodging all these attacks, and this Native American guy ends up flinging a knife into the back of her head. And again, that's another scene that I don't remember a whole lot of PG movies where people graphically got a knife to the back of the head. So
I know, and you also see the blood.
Yeah, that's the only blood I think in the movie.
I know, and it's like it's a really haunting image, as she's like feeling her head, and then like kind of like brings her hand down, and then you see the blood. Yeah, that's another one of those scenes where it's just like, this is too hardcore to be PG.
The director had a good point. Like, he had a good argument. This movie should not be PG, and it probably did kill any chance it ever have of making an audience, because, again, this is the Friday the 13th era, and people are not going to go see a PG-rated slasher movie. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, they just won't.
Although I will say, have you ever seen the James Bond movie, A View to a Kill, where Tanya Roberts is in it?
I have not seen many James Bond movies.
Okay. Well, yeah, this is more for the people who have. People who have seen that movie know that Tanya Roberts is exceptionally annoying in that movie, where she just screams, "James!" like the whole movie. And so if you wanted her to get a knife in the back of the head at any point in A View to a Kill, this movie would be very cathartic because you do finally see it. So there you go. If you hate her in A View to a Kill, watch this movie and you will gain a small bit of closure in your life.
That actually reminds me of the scene in House of Wax, the remake,
Mm-hmm.
which is a pretty terrible movie, but it's like...
Isn't that the one with Paris Hilton? Isn't she in that?
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of inanimate figures who open their mouths and make sounds, Paris Hilton's in that movie.
Yeah. The thing that's like so satisfying about that movie is, Paris Hilton does get probably the most gruesome death of that movie.
Oh, well, good.
But I mean, and it's funny because like House of Wax, that's one of those movies that really kind of captures the same weird, thing, because it has to do with wax figures. So, it kind of has that same type of vibe as the Tourist Trap. I mean, even though, the remake of House of Wax is definitely, or the remake, because that's like the second remake of House of Wax is actually, for the most part, just a cliche, horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
But it does, have some merits. And one of those merits is, that it has that similar vibe of, or it just has that similar aspect of inanimate figures, basically.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've actually heard people say that, oh, House of Wax, that's like a remake of Tourist Trap. And I'm like, well, not really, but one could say Tourist Trap is kind of a remake of the original House of Wax. And they're
Yeah.
not straight remakes of one another, but yeah, they all share kind of a similar vibe.
Yeah, like the funny thing, like with House of Wax, like I think there was because it actually has three different versions. Because there was one in 1990, no, yeah, 1933. That was the original, and then they came out with the Vincent Price one in 1953, and then I think it was like 2004, 2005, and oh no, 2005. That's when they came out with the remake. So like that's one of those like rare movies that it has more than just one remake. But anyways, that's kind of going off topic.
When you said there were three versions, I thought you meant there was like three different endings of the House of Wax in the 2000s, and I was going to say like one version Paris Hilton dies, and another version Lindsay Lohan dies, and another one like the Olsen twins both get picked off.
I mean that would be pretty comical, but
It's like Clue. They filmed it with three different endings, and you got whichever theater you went to, you got to see a different ending.
I would pay money for that, to be honest.
Okay, so really, that's the whole plot of the movie. All these people get picked off, and Slauson kills them, turns them into mannequins that will live forever with him in his house. And at the end of the movie, we get this showdown where he's got the one girl, Molly, who I have to say, in a movie, most slasher movies don't have good acting. And this movie is surprisingly competent. It's actually not that bad because they have Chuck Connors and they have some other decent actors, which is weird, I know, when Tanya Roberts is in the conversation. But I have to say, the heroine in this movie, Molly, is the worst actress of the bunch, and she's absolutely brutal in some of these scenes at the end where she's emoting.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like they're just because I feel like, especially that one scene that I was already speaking about earlier, when she is talking to Chuck Connors,
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's like, or basically when she's like listening to him and the story, like her expression shows a bit of sympathy, but then like her character just all of a sudden changes as soon as the guy comes in to save her, and it's like just so, it felt so strange and out of place,
Yeah.
It's just like, and I think it had a lot to do with the acting. It just like was like,
She's terrible.
yeah.
I hate to say that. I hope she's not listening. I'm sure she became a very accomplished actress later in life, but at this point in her career, maybe she shouldn't have been the lead in the movie. That's all I'm saying.
For sure, yeah. I thought like Tanya Roberts should have honestly been the
Yeah,
lead.
exactly. You got whatever. She's going to be on the cover of Playboy in a year. You give her the lead in the movie. Don't make her the second death or the second in command. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So Molly, the main girl, gets a proposition by Slauson. He wants her to live with him and become his wife, and he starts doing creepy stuff like he made a mask out of his dead wife's face. He puts it on her and starts kissing her, and she's like, ew, and like so he's like, say you love me, say you're gonna stay with me, and so she has to kind of say this just to appease him. And then at the end of the movie, we get the showdown where one of the male teenagers, Jerry, I think his name is, Jerry comes in and he saves the
Yeah.
day. He's got a knife or something. He's going to start an axe. He's going to hit Slauson with it. And this is where we discover that Slauson has another power that we weren't aware of, where he can just suddenly turn Jerry from flesh to mannequin using his mind.
Wait, what? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember the scene where Jerry's about to save the day, and Slauson's like, "You can't kill me," and he like blinks his eyes, and all of a sudden Jerry's a mannequin. Jerry has literally turned into a latex mannequin right there in the spot, which we were unaware that Slauson had this power up until this point in the movie, and it's like, oh crap, like no one's ever gonna escape if he can do that to people.
I know that there was definitely a certain, he was a little bit overpowered at times, and that was definitely one of those scenes where you're just like, shit, like nothing can go past this guy, and it's yeah, because all of a sudden, he just starts taking the arm off.
Yeah, he pulls Jerry's arm off. Jerry's still human from neck up, and he's looking around. He's like, "What?" And Slauson starts pulling his arms off and throwing them around the room. So yeah, it becomes the boss fight basically.
Right? Yeah, that part it's because it's basically like the like, I don't know, it's just like it's so, I don't know, it's like just the most uncliche type of thing you'd possibly see, because like in a regular slasher film, like the guy would come in and he'd probably save the day, like that's typically how it works.
Mm-hmm.
But like that one, it seemed like they almost poked fun at it in a way, it's because he, just like nonchalantly just pulled his arm off, and then he just twisted his head off, and just like he basically just looked at Molly and was like, what you gonna do about it,
Yeah. Yeah, and this movie culminates with this big scene. The hero, Jerry, has come back to save the day. He gets turned into a mannequin, and it's basically Holly and Slauson. And the last scene in this movie is just this insane scene of the mannequins all coming back to human form and Slauson laughing, and they're all chanting, "Join us! Join us!" It's like an Evil Dead movie at this point. Like, what the hell is going on in this movie? And then she just nonchalantly picks up an axe and hits Slauson in the back of the head and kills him, which I think is kind of a cop-out of an ending. But Molly, she escapes, she goes and leaves, and this is where we get this wonderfully bizarre final shot in the movie. It's a freeze frame. They actually freeze on this before we go to the credits of Molly driving away with her 4 dead friends in the back seat. She's basically her and her 4 mannequin friends now. They've all been killed and turned into latex, and she has them in the back seat of her Jeep, and they're all sitting there all stiff and awkward, but she's driving with them, and she escaped, and she's got this weird look of terror on her face, like, what the hell am I going to do with these 4 mannequins now? And this is where the movie ends. It just stops. So we get the happy ending, but at the same time, it's kind of unsettling because what's she going to do with 4 mannequins of her dead friends now?
I know. And, like, just the fact that it was a freeze frame ending was like, it's because, like, you're able to truly observe it, And
oh, yeah. You get to see every detail.
Yeah. I actually liked that ending. I didn't like how she kills the villain because I just feel like that was kind of a cop-out type of thing. But I did like the final shot, though. That was, the freeze frame. Yeah. That was pretty.
This is one of those movies I always feel would have been stronger with an unhappy ending, where he basically turns Molly into his wife and she lives as a mannequin in his house. I think that would have been more unsettling, and it would open the door for, even if they didn't do a sequel, where you'd think, man, what would have happened next? Like, the guy got away with it. That's why I wish it would have been an unhappy ending. But we get the bizarre, her friends are all dead and she's taking their mannequins ostensibly home with her, so she's going to put them in her house or something, which I don't know. But anyway,
I know, it's like, what's she going to do with it?
Yeah, exactly. She's going to sell them. They didn't have eBay yet, so I don't know what she's going to do.
Yeah, so she's like going to give them to their parents and basically be like, this, like they were lost along the way, and here's the memory for you.
That is the world's worst Christmas present. Your son's dead, but here's the mannequin that looks exactly like him. Merry Christmas.
Basically, I mean, it's truly like it's an iconic ending, but it's like once you really think about it, it's like, what's she gonna do with it?
Yeah, and you think like a mannequin of your deceased child. That's not like a really good Christmas gift. That's more like a shitty Hanukkah gift.
Right.
Sorry, I had to do that one. Okay. Yeah, so the movie ends, and it's just this wonderfully bizarre, off-kilter, unsettling horror movie. And again, I would say it's about 45 to 50 minutes of a great horror movie, and then about 30 minutes of other stuff, and then a wonderfully twisted ending. And again, it's, as I said at the start, it's not a masterpiece, but it's not a waste of your time either. It's right in the middle ground of these movies that you would have found in a video store in the 80s. You would have just grabbed at random, and you would have watched, and you would have remembered it. Like, you might not have loved it, but it would have stuck in your psyche. You would have remembered those damn mannequins.
Right.
And like I remember those damn film strips attacking that guy back in 1980. I've never forgotten that. And that's the thing with this movie, that it's just, I would highly recommend everybody see it at least once, just so you can know what we're talking about with the creepiness of these mannequins and the music, and there's jaws that just hang open a little further than they should. It's just very unsettling and weird.
Yeah. Let's see, there was one scene that I, like, once you know the context of it, it's pretty funny. I believe it's Molly who's, like, in a bed at some point, and mannequin figure like gives her a drink, and then it's like that's all you see from that mannequin, but apparently
she turns to life, right?
What's that?
Yeah, the mannequin, I know the scene you're talking about. She's laying in bed, and all of a sudden there's a mannequin staring at her, and all of a sudden the mannequin like turns to flesh and starts giving her a drink, and then goes back and goes into mannequin again. I know exactly that scene. Yeah,
so that is actually the director's wife. And she actually had lines. I think she had like 2 lines in that scene, and he edited them out, and she has never forgiven him for it.
You cut out your wife's lines? That's terrible.
I know. Yeah, so that I found to be a pretty interesting piece of trivia right there.
Yeah, as we get later into the movie, for people who haven't seen it, the mannequins are going from stone to flesh to stone, like they're turning into real life and then back again. And it's just crazy. It's back and forth. You have no idea what's up, what's down, what's going on, what's real until the very end. So yeah, I think it gets a little too complex and fancy for its own good, but the movie's clearly having a good time, and again, it's just so off kilter. It keeps you off balance, and that's what I love in a good horror movie, where you don't really know what's going on, what's truth and what isn't.
Yeah, I entirely agree.
And before we go here, there was one mannequin I saw in this last viewing. There's a scene where it's Becky and Jerry, I think, are hiding in the hall, and Slosson's looking for them in his house, and they're kind of blending in, trying to look like a mannequin so he can't find them. If you look very close, one of the mannequins is a dead ringer for Taylor Swift. So there you go. For these Swift heads out there, you can watch this movie and look for your heroine. She's in here somewhere as a mannequin.
That scene is actually incredibly comical to me, like because the mannequins around them are so
real.
Yeah, I mean, but they're clearly still mannequins though, whereas like Tanya Roberts and Jerry, I don't know the actor's name, so I'll just say that, but they are clearly humans amongst mannequins in that scene. Like you can definitely see the contrast between the humans and the mannequins, even though that the mannequins are, very human-like. It's like that scene, you can definitely see the difference. And what I find so funny about it is that Chuck Connors, is basically just like going, or is like walking throughout the entire room, just looking at all the mannequins, and he doesn't see the difference.
I find it hard to believe he wouldn't know every single mannequin in his house by name.
I know.
Because he's doing creepy stuff to those mannequins. So, like, I'm sure he knows every inch of every one of those female mannequins. So, yeah, it's weird that there's two humans that he happens to be chasing that look nothing like any of the mannequins, yet they're able to fool him by standing in the middle of mannequins and just standing still. I can see in that instance why Riff Tracks may have wanted to riff this movie.
Yeah, that was one of those scenes where I was honestly cracking up. Like, I thought that was pretty funny, but...
I mean, I knew Tanya Roberts was a wooden actress, but that's really stretching it.
Right. By the way, another interesting piece of trivia is that this movie is a remake to this director's short thesis film about a blind man who lives alone in a theater attic.
I heard about that. This was like an art for a student film he made in college, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I've never seen it myself, but it is technically a remake.
It's probably like a 20-minute student film, and he probably won some awards for it. And then a couple of years later, he's like, I could expand that and make it a horror movie, which, for people who know their Evil Dead trivia, is something that Sam Raimi once did, that he made a student film and just expanded that into the Evil Dead. So that's not really uncommon.
Yeah, true. But yeah, it's still interesting because the plot of the original, which it's called The Spider Will Kill You.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically about how he kind of falls in love with the mannequin. And it's not really about any sort of obsessive thing about him trying to collect so many mannequins. It's just about him and one other mannequin.
And what's that title?
It's called The Spider Will Kill You.
Okay. I've never heard that. I saw the one in the 80s with Andrew McCarthy and Kim Cattrall where he falls in love with a mannequin. But I'm guessing that's a whole different story.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, before we sign off here, I have to say one of the greatest things about this movie, again, it's not a masterpiece, but there's so many neat things about this movie, and it's just fun to talk about because it's fun to watch and just discuss how goofy it is. But
yeah.
The tagline of this movie, the slogan, which I've always thought is just absolute marketing genius. You know which one I'm talking about? It's written on the cover of the DVD. All right, here it is.
Go ahead.
Here's the tagline of this movie. Every year, young people disappear. And that's it. So it's implied that of the hundreds and hundreds of runaways and missing persons cases in the 70s, that many of them met fates similar to this, where they ended up at Slosson's Lost Oasis and turned into mannequins. So that's what I love about the open-endedness of that slogan. Every year, young people disappear.
I know. It's trying to be so ominous, and it's so unintentionally so unintentionally offensive.
Well, yeah, just think about that next time you're in Sears or Target or something and you see a mannequin. Just think that could be a missing kid back from the 70s. And there, I just made your trip to Target a lot creepier.
This is funny. But there's two more actually trivia pieces that I wanted to discuss.
Okay, two more, then we'll sign off here. What do you got?
So one of them is about the the plaster that's like used on
On her face.
Tina's face.
Yeah, on
Yes,
Tina's face.
that is. I mean, like originally when I saw it, I honestly thought that was just shaving cream. Well, I mean that was like a long time ago, but it's actually dough, which I don't know how they were able to make it look like that, but
Well, I've always wondered in that scene because she's got dough smeared on her face, and clearly, like, they're not killing her, but like, how did that actress breathe during that scene? I don't see any visible straws or any holes in her nose that's allowing her to breathe, so I don't know. And you see her with stuff on her face covering her nostrils and mouth and eyes for a good 5 minutes, so I don't know how they filmed that without killing her, and I'm assuming they didn't kill her. But then again, this is the 70s where it was unregulated. They may have just killed the actress. I don't know. I assume they didn't, but I do wonder that when I watch that, how did she not suffocate right there?
I know that was. It's because it also just like the way that her chest is going up and down,
Hmm.
like, and then together with like the visuals of that all being over her face, yeah, it does leave you wondering.
All right,
um,
what else? What else you got?
so it's about Tanya Robert when she is running through the woods. She actually insisted that she would do that with her shoes off, so just barefoot.
So she's a method actress.
Yeah, because she at least the way she explained it was that she wanted it to create more like of a genuine feeling of fear and distress within her. So it would be able to have a more pure performance, I guess. Which, I can respect that. She's at least putting some effort into it.
So wait, she wouldn't take her top off, but she'd take her shoes off.
Yeah, but the interesting thing though was that the result of all of that was that her feet were bloody.
Well, yeah, you think? These stars, they suffer for our art.
Yeah.
Tanya Roberts specifically ran barefoot through the forest for a scene, just to make the scene look better. And really, you don't even notice. All you notice is that in real life, she ended up with bloody feet. So the stars, they suffer for their craft.
Right. It's pretty glorious. And then also a glorious quote that I feel is very underappreciated is when Davey, Chuck Connor's character is like, we're going to have a party, and then he starts like dancing as soon as like right before he's actually going to put the plaster on that girl's face, and like the Tanya Roberts and Jerry are just like kind of observing as he's basically just dancing and saying we're going to have a party, and then like 2 minutes later he's killing, like gruesomely like killing.
Yeah. No, it's not the type of scene you'd see from Chuck Connors of The Rifleman, where he's dancing around and having a tea party while wearing a women's wig.
I actually appreciate that. It's very, yeah, it's admirable in my mind.
Okay, Justin, before we sign off, do you have anything else you want to say about the horror genre, Tourist Trap, the soundtrack, anything in general? Tanya Roberts, her halter top, any last comments?
Let's see. I would like to add that though I've seen like a shit ton of horror movies, I am still really trying to get into the more obscure like horror movies, like for example the White Ribbon by Michael Haneke, or like some of the more obscure like psychological films, and funny games, and and the David Cronenberg films, that have a more unhinged, type of horror that is not particularly halted by any sort of studio expectations or anything like that. So yeah, I definitely I have so many on my watch list of horror movies like that,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm sure that in a year my horror movie perspective will be so much different. But yeah, so for right now, what I mentioned at the beginning, those are my current favorites, and those have been my favorites for a while. So I don't think that those will generally change, but I feel like I'll soon get some more favorites added to that as I watch more of those types of movies.
Okay, as long as you never lose your love for movies like Tourist Trap.
No, definitely not. I will always have a soft spot for slasher movies from the 70s and 80s. Like, it's yeah, and there was that one movie that I recommended to you called Terror at Red Wolf Inn.
I've heard about that. I looked into that. That is one it's a asterisk, might be a Staff Picks episode in the future. So let's hold off on that one.
Okay, cool. Because yeah, that one is one you definitely appreciate. It's pretty bonkers, and it gets really interesting. So I think you'd really enjoy it.
Okay, and again, that kind of wraps up our coverage here of Tourist Trap. As Justin said, kind of a bonkers, bizarre, very unsettling, understated, oddly PG-rated horror movie that Stephen King cannot say enough of. Again, this is his choice for the most underrated horror movie of all time. He said that in the early 80s. I don't know if he would still say that, but again, just when Stephen King is recommending something, you might want to check it out. So, as always, again, my name is Mario Lanza. This is Staff Picks. If you want to reach me, if you have any feedback, if you'd like to mention any other movies you think I should talk about, you can reach me at staffpickspodcast@gmail.com. You can reach me on Twitter at Mario J. Lanza. And until the next time I talk to you, I will be out there looking for underrated, underloved, or just unknown movies that I think just need a little more attention. I'll talk to you guys later. Watch out for the tourist traps out there. Goodbye.
Your face is burning now. The plaster's getting tight. Your world is dark. You'll never see again. It's getting hard to breathe, isn't it? I'm going to seal the last openings. You won't be able to breathe, but you won't suffocate. Your heart will burst from fright before you lose consciousness.